One morning, General Douglas MacArthur was inspecting a Pacific base and saw soldiers working in a corner. Curious, he asked, "Soldier, what are you doing?" "Sir, we're setting up a decoy command post to mislead the enemy," replied a nervous private. "Interesting, but how will you ensure the enemy targets this decoy?" MacArthur asked. The private glanced at his comrades, and a sergeant confidently replied, "Sir, we're spreading false intelligence." MacArthur raised an eyebrow. "And if the enemy catches on?" The sergeant said, "We also pretend to frequently relocate our headquarters to add layers of confusion." Laughing, MacArthur said, "Layers of confusion. I expected you to say you'd mark the decoy with a big red X. Or with an old shoe, so if we forget the spot, we'll have new shoes." The private quickly added. MacArthur chuckled. "New shoes! If only my generals were as clever as you boys, we'd have won the war already." General Patton was observing his troops from a hilltop. A young private, whose task was to run up the hill to report the situation, arrived in front of him, sweating profusely and gasping for breath. Patton, with his sharp eyes, stared at the young soldier and asked, "Private, why are you breathing as if you've just run a marathon?" The private tried to catch his breath and replied, "Sir, I'm just following your orders to run as fast as I can to get here." Patton nodded approvingly but couldn't resist making a joke. "Good job, private. But remember, in battle, if you're running that fast, make sure you're chasing a tank, not the other way around." Hearing Patton's comment, the private quickly replied, "Sir, if I see a tank, I'll run faster than the wind. But hopefully the tank will have to stop to catch its breath too." George Marshall visited a remote army base to assess his troops' morale directly. Approaching a group of soldiers, Marshall asked a young private, "Son, if you had to choose, would you rather operate this artillery piece or write a letter to your in-laws?" Without missing a beat, the private responded, "Sir, to be honest, I'd rather operate the artillery. At least I know where the shells are landing." Surprised by the private's wit, Marshall pressed on. "All right then, tell me, what do you think is the secret to winning this war?" The private, answering confidently, said, "Well, General, I believe the secret is to keep the enemy guessing." "Guessing?" Marshall inquired, intrigued by the soldier's perspective. "Yes, sir," the private replied with a straight face. "For instance, they're still trying to figure out why you asked me about my in-laws." Marshall burst into laughter. "It seems they're as confounding to the enemy as they are to us." General Patton noticed a soldier standing a bit too relaxed for his liking. Marching over, Patton barked, "Soldier, why aren't you standing at attention?" The soldier quickly straightened up, but nervously replied, "Sir, I'm sorry, sir. It's just that I was, practicing to look casual for when the war is over, sir." Patton paused for a moment, then leaned in and said, "Well, soldier, if you don't start practicing to win this war, there won't be any casual to look forward to." The soldier quickly replied, "Yes, sir. But if I start practicing to win as hard as you, sir, they might promote me to general too fast, and then who would be left to follow orders?" Patton raised an eyebrow, surprised by the soldier's cheekiness, then let out a hearty laugh. "Well, soldier, if you can handle the pressure, maybe we could use a few more generals with a sense of humor around here." General Ridgway was known for always carrying a grenade as his personal symbol of readiness and aggression. One day, while inspecting a frontline position, he visited a small outpost manned by a few nervous young soldiers. As he climbed into the trench, one soldier spotted the grenade hanging from his belt. Eyes wide, the soldier turned to his buddy and whispered loudly enough for Ridgway to hear, "Watch out! The general's brought his own grenade. He must be planning to start the party himself today." Ridgway, overhearing the comment, chuckled and reassured them, "Don't worry, boys, I only use this if the coffee runs out." After General Ridgway's comment, the soldier grinned and responded, "In that case, General, I'll make sure our coffee supply is the best guarded spot on the front line. We can't afford any explosive wake-up calls around here." One day, Field Marshal Montgomery decided to test his troops in North Africa. He approached a young private and asked, "Soldier, what would you do if you saw a column of German tanks approaching your position?" The private stood at attention and replied, Sir, I would grab my anti-tank rifle, aim carefully, and take out as many tanks as I could, sir. Montgomery nodded and asked, "And what if your rifle jammed?" The private answered, "Sir, I would use my grenades and take cover, sir." Montgomery continued, "And what if you ran out of grenades?" The private confidently said, "Sir, I would use my bayonet and fight to the last, sir." Montgomery asked, "And what if the bayonet broke?" The private, realizing the field marshal was relentless, grinned and said, "Sir, in that case, I'd run faster than you because I've seen your morning jog, sir." One sunny afternoon, General Patton decided to conduct a surprise inspection at a military base in Europe. His sharp eyes scanned a young soldier from head to toe. "Private," Patton said gruffly, "is that a smudge I see on your boot?" The private, trying to stay composed, replied, "Sir, it might be, sir. But I assure you it wasn't there when I left my bunk this morning." Patton raised an eyebrow. "Is that so? Are you telling me the dirt just decided to jump on your boot while you were marching here?" The private immediately responded loudly, "Sir, with all due respect, I think the dirt heard you were coming and wanted to see the legendary General Patton for itself." Patton stared at the private for a moment. Then, to everyone's surprise, a smile appeared on his usually stern face. He chuckled and said, "That's clever, Private, but next time, tell the dirt I'm not giving autographs." General LeMay walks into the restroom at a military base. As he meticulously washes his hands, he notices an army soldier exiting a stall and heading straight for the door without stopping at the sink. LeMay, with his usual stern demeanor, says, "Soldier, in the Air Force, we wash our hands after we handle important business." The army soldier, with a sly grin, replies, "Well, General, in the army they teach us efficiency, clean shots, clean hands." LeMay, taken aback for a moment, lets out a rare chuckle and says, "Touché, soldier." In a dusty military camp, General Patton stood tall, surveying the new recruits. Among them was a fresh-faced recruit with a glint of ambition in his eyes. As Patton approached, the young soldier snapped to attention, eager to make an impression. Patton, with his usual stern demeanor, asked, "So, soldier, what do you hope to achieve in the army?" Without missing a beat, the recruit confidently replied, "Sir, I plan to be a general within 2 years." Patton raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "Are you insane?" The recruit smiled and quipped, "Is that a requirement, sir?" Patton chuckled, nodded. "Good, at least you've managed to confuse a general." Captain Roger and Lieutenant Johnson were in the field for the night. As they prepared to rest under the stars, Lieutenant Johnson turned to Captain Roger and said, "Sir, look up at the sky and tell me what you see." Captain Roger, in his usual serious tone, replied, "I see millions of stars." Lieutenant Johnson asked, "And what does that tell you, sir?" Captain Roger pondered for a moment. "Astronomically, it tells me there are billions of galaxies and countless planets. Theologically, it reminds me of the vastness of the universe and how small we are. Meteorologically, it suggests we'll have clear skies tomorrow." "What about you, Johnson? What does it tell you?" Lieutenant Johnson grinned. "Well, sir, it tells me someone stole our tent." Captain Roger sighed deeply, then with a dry smile said, "Well, Johnson, I guess we're camping the minimalist way tonight." One day, General Ridgway decided to visit a frontline unit to test the morale of his troops. Noticing a young soldier taking notes, Ridgway asked, "Private, what's the first thing you would do if you found yourself in the middle of an enemy attack?" The young soldier looked up and replied, "General, the first thing I'd do is find someone higher up the chain of command to blame." Ridgway raised his eyebrows and asked, "And what do you think is the key to winning this war?" The private paused thoughtfully before responding, "Sir, I think the key is to stay unpredictable." "Unpredictable," Ridgway echoed, intrigued by the soldier's insight. "Yes, sir," the private said confidently. "For example, the enemy is still baffled by why you're here chatting with me instead of planning the next move." Ridgway burst into laughter and replied, "Well, if confusing the enemy is the goal, maybe I should ask you to handle our battle plans." During World War II, Private Johnson, tasked with sorting captured goods in a German warehouse, stumbled upon a beautifully wrapped package labeled "For den Führer." Excited, Johnson thought, "Wow, something special for Hitler himself." He eagerly opened the package and found a pair of fancy boxer shorts monogrammed with AH. Amused, he showed them off to his buddy, Private Smith. Smith laughed and said, "Man, you just uncovered the secret to his confidence." Johnson, chuckling, replied, "What do you think I should do with these?" Smith, with a grin, suggested, "Send them to the president. Imagine Roosevelt's face when he opens a box of Hitler's shorts." So they sent the box to the White House with a note, "From Hitler with love." A few weeks later, they received a thank you note. "Thank you for the thoughtful gift. We found the perfect use for them. Our new flagpole needed a windsock.